When we look back at the big three, one thing that always stands out for me are the villain groups. These weren't just side threats for the heroes to take down. They were organizations with vision, with philosophy, with the power to shake the entire worlds of their series. In Naruto we had the Akatsuki, a group of rogue shinobi who turned the cycle of hatred into their weapon. And in Bleach we had the Espada, who stood as the embodiment of death itself. Then in One Piece the Cross Guild flipped the script on the Navy, proving that the sea still had room for chaos and unpredictability even this late into the series. Each of these groups did more than just create tension. They expanded the worlds they belonged to and challenged the heroes on every level, leaving behind moments that fans will never forget. So in this video I want to analyze the villain organizations of the big three, how they were built, what they stood for, and the way they made their stories feel so much bigger. Let's start with the Akatsuki, because when it comes to iconic villain groups they sit at the very top. The black cloaks with the red clouds, the eerie rings, the image of 10 rogue shinobi moving in the shadows. Just the sight of them was enough to raise the tension in Naruto. They carried themselves like a secret order, and every appearance felt like the story was about to take a darker, more serious turn. The origin of the Akatsuki makes them especially compelling. What started with Yahiko, Nagato, and Konan was meant to be a movement for peace, born from the trauma of war. But over time that mission hardened into something more ruthless. Under Nagato's leadership as Pain, peace became something to be forced onto the world through fear and overwhelming destruction. This idea of peace through pain turned the Akatsuki into more than mercenaries or criminals. They became a force that challenged the shinobi system itself, a system built on endless cycles of revenge and bloodshed. The way they operated also gave the group a unique identity. They weren't a massive army or empire. They were a handful of elite shinobi, organized into pairs and sent out on missions. That structure was perfect for storytelling. Each duo had its own personality, its own philosophy, and its own flavor of conflict. Deidara and Sasori brought arrogance and artistry. Hidan and Kakuzu embodied fanaticism and greed, while Itachi and Kisame carried mystery and menace. Every new encounter with them was unpredictable, but the danger was always real. The leadership within the Akatsuki added another layer. Pain envisioned a world terrified into peace through the power of the tailed beasts, and Obito, once revealed, took it further, turning the Akatsuki into a tool for the infinite Tsukuyomi plan, which would be a complete rewrite of reality through illusion. Later, Madara's shadow loomed even larger behind it all. Each shift in control didn't dilute the group. It pushed their vision into even more extreme territory. It showed how fragile the world was, and how quickly ideology could spiral into something apocalyptic. And through all of this, the Akatsuki reshaped Naruto's world. Their hunt for the Jinchuriki forced every village to reckon with the value or the mistreatment of their hosts. Their attacks destabilized nations, from Gaara's kidnapping to Pain's devastating invasion of Konoha, and ultimately their existence became the catalyst for the Fourth Great Ninja War, a conflict that finally united the shinobi world in a way that nothing else ever could. The irony is powerful. By trying to impose their vision of peace, they ended up pushing the world closer to the unity they always claimed to want. What makes them unforgettable is how they were introduced and revealed. We didn't meet all 10 members at once. They entered the story slowly, in fragments, almost like shadows creeping in from the edges. Each appearance carried weight, and each battle felt like a headline moment. By the time Pain himself descended on Konoha, the Akatsuki had become the defining threat of the entire series. They embodied the core themes of Naruto, cycles of hatred, the meaning of peace, and the cost of ideology, while leaving behind some of the most iconic moments in shonen anime. Next, let's look at the Espada. The Espada and Bleach stand as one of the most striking villain groups in shonen. 10 Arank are each ranked by power and representing an aspect of death. They were living embodiments of one of Bleach's core themes, the many faces of mortality and emptiness. Aizen's role in shaping them gave the group its identity. He didn't simply gather strong hollows, he imposed order on chaos, turning primal monsters into a disciplined hierarchy, ranked from 10 down to 0. The Espada reflected a structured mirror of Soul Society itself. On one side stood the captains, and on the other the Espada. That symmetry made every clash between them feel inevitable, like two sides of the same coin finally colliding. Through the Espada, Bleach expanded its world in bold new directions. Before this arc, hollows were dangerous but one note. They were creatures of instinct, but with the Espada suddenly they had personalities, histories, and philosophies. Kubo used them to introduce Hueco Mundo, a desolate realm of eternal night. It helped to show us how hollows evolved beyond mindless hunger. Each Espada carried their own tragic edge, whether it was Ulquiorra's cold nihilism or Stark's quiet solitude. Together they turned the hollow race from faceless threats into into some of the most memorable characters in the series. Every battle against the Espada carried more than just physical stakes. Ichigo's duel with Ulquiorra became a confrontation between despair and the will to keep moving forward. Stark fought with unmatched strength, yet all he wanted was companionship, making his final moments strangely heartbreaking. These fights were philosophical showdowns that gave each victory and defeat a deeper meaning. By the end of Hueco Mundo and the fake Karakura arcs, the Espada had defined an entire era of Bleach's storytelling. What makes them so enduring is the blend of scale and symbolism. They made the world feel bigger, the conflicts feel heavier, and the themes feel sharper. When people think of Bleach at its peak, the Espada are right at the heart of that memory. A villain group that embodied the very essence of what the series was all about. And finally, let's turn to One Piece, where things play out a little differently. Unlike in Naruto or Bleach, One Piece doesn't really build its villains around tightly organized groups with a single ideology. The world Oda created is already full of massive structures. The Marines, the Yonko, the Revolutionaries, the world government. These powers are so huge and interconnected that there's rarely space for a single villain group to dominate the story the way the Akatsuki or Espada did. The villains in One Piece tend to be individual rulers, pirate crews, or government institutions. So with all that being said, in One Piece I've chosen to go with the Cross Guild. When we look at the villain organizations in the big three, the Cross Guild might not match the same mold as the others, but it's still one of the most fascinating groups to emerge in the later saga. The Cross Guild brings together Crocodile, Mihawk, and somehow even Buggy as its so-called leader, and the way they're presented tells us a lot about the changing world of One Piece. This is a group that flipped the power dynamic of the seas by putting bounties on the Marines. For centuries it's been the Navy hunting pirates, but now thanks to the Cross Guild, the hunters have become the hunted. That one decision shifts the balance of fear. Suddenly even the ordinary citizens or bounty hunters have an incentive to strike against the Marines, and that undermines the authority the world government has relied on for so long. The structure of the Cross Guild is also unique. Outwardly Buggy sits at the top, hailed as a Yonko, but inside we know Crocodile and Mihawk are the real masterminds. This setup works perfectly in One Piece's style, because it combines both comedy with genuine danger. The world fears Buggy's supposed genius. Meanwhile, in reality, it's Crocodile's schemes and Mihawk's unmatched strength that make the guild a true threat. And that blend of lightheartedness and seriousness captures what makes One Piece villains so memorable. They can be ridiculous on the surface, but terrifying once you dig deeper. Narratively, the Cross Guild enriches the late game story by showing us how chaotic the seas have become after the warlord system was abolished. It brings back old players like Crocodile, gives Mihawk a bigger role than just being Zoro's end goal, and puts Buggy in a position that's as hilarious as it is unsettling. If pirates can unite even loosely and turn the government's weapons back on them, then the world order is nowhere near as stable as it pretends to be. This isn't a loyal family like Whitebeard's crew, or a rigid empire like Kaido's forces. It's an uneasy alliance built on convenience, ego, and reputation. Mihawk and Crocodile don't respect Buggy, and Buggy barely understands how he got there. Yet together they become one of the most feared names on the seas. That tension makes their future in the story wide open. They could implode at any moment, or they could escalate into one of the final major powers standing in Luffy's way. They might not have the long history or tight cohesion of the Akatsuki or Espada, but in the world of One Piece they represent something just as important: the chaos and unpredictability that defines the seas. They're a reminder that in Oda's world, image is power, reputation can outweigh reality, and even the unlikeliest of alliances can change the balance of everything. So all in all, when you look at these three groups side by side, it's clear why they stand out so much. The Akatsuki took Naruto's theme of hatred and peace and pushed it to its breaking point. The Espada gave Bleach a haunting reflection of death itself. And the Cross Guild, though newer, captures the essence of One Piece's world. What they all share is the way they expand their stories. They redefine the scale of conflict, deepen the lore, and force the main characters to grow in ways they couldn't have otherwise. In shonen anime, a great villain group doesn't just test the hero, it changes the world around them, leaving a mark that lasts long after the battles are over.